We are live.
Namaste everyone, my name is Vaishali Shah. I welcome each one of you to my session on Hindu culture and lifestyle. As promised, today we have a very eminent guest from USA. His name is Mr. Raj Vedam. He is a scholar in his own way. We'll understand his background from him. But before we start, let's do a small prayer. Guru Brahma, Guru Vishnu, Guru Devo Maheshwara, Guru Sakshat Parabrahma, Tasmai Shri Guru Namaha. So friends, without taking much of your time, over to you, Mr. Raj. Namaste, welcome to my session.
Namaste, very glad to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Pleasure, sir. Thank you for your time. And I'm really glad that we are going to have this very interesting conversation about varied subjects. So let's start with your background. Please tell us something about yourself.
Okay, that's the toughest question to ask. I think hopefully that's the toughest one because I don't like to talk much about myself.
No, I generally like to ask because it gives us something directly from yourself. I would like to know what do you think about yourself? What work you've done?
Oh my goodness. Okay, so I'm a Bangalorean, born and brought up in Bangalore, and I speak Tamil. I'm a Tamil. We speak Tamil at home, and my schooling is in Bangalore, early schooling in Bangalore. And I got my bachelor's in electrical engineering, Mysore University. I got my master's from Indian Institute of Science in Bangalore, Ph.D. from Oregon State in USA, all in electrical engineering. And I have a wide range of professional interests, whether it is in mathematics, electrical engineering, modeling, identification, aircraft control, a whole lot of fields. So I've had a stint in many of these things, have several papers and patents in these fields. I have also been very interested in Indian history. For a very long time, have been interested in history, and I've been reading quite a bit on history. So the best way to describe me today is somebody who's trying to make sense out of the narratives on Indian history using tools of the physical sciences, the evidence for physical sciences, what we have, and can we apply it to the narratives, and can we make sense so that our narratives are not merely our opinions, but these are actually based on some tangible evidence, some rational thinking, some logical thinking. So Vaishali ji, I think that in short is my background.
So how did you enter into this genre of knowledge? Because this is something different, right? Vedic scriptures are different from, as in apparently the way people perceive is that science is different from so-called ritualistic Vedic scriptures, which I personally don't think. I think they are the science books only, and our rishis were scientists. So how did you cross over? How did you come this side of the world?
Outstanding question, outstanding question. So strangely enough, I studied in Catholic institutions all the way from my first standard till my 12th standard. It's very deeply Westernized, and I play Western music and all these kinds of things. And obviously also thinking the kind of things they stuff into your head, that everything to do with Indian scriptures, religion is all mythology, rubbish, backward, primitive, and these kind of thinkings. I was a recipient of that kind of information during my childhood days. However, in our family, we were practicing Hindus. So my parents used to conduct all the homas at home, Ganapati Homa, Satyanarayana Puja, many things of this nature. My father had an extensive library of Chinmayananda's books, Shivananda's books, various other books, and books at his age, his level, as well as at our level. I was a voracious reader. I grew up at a time when there was no TV in India, right? We were all brought up on a diet of reading. Reading was our entertainment, our release, and so on. So I read, and each time I read in the classroom, I felt, no, what they're saying is not right. There's more to our history than what they're saying. So from a very young age, that idea has been in my mind, that to push back whatever they're telling in class, that this is not the real story. So eventually, as time went on, read more and more. When I went to Oregon State, I experienced culture shock. I experienced culture shock because I went in 1990. That was a time when Bangalore was pretty cosmopolitan. Bangalore was pretty cosmopolitan in 1990. But even then, when I went on a tour of the United States, I said, my God, look at this country, how they are living, and look where we are, and why are we like this, and why are they like that? So I got that culture shock, which I internalized into a study of Indian books at the Oregon State University Library. They had a huge section of books in India. So I must have read every book on the shelf. So much so that my roommate used to ask, Raj, have you come here for a PhD in electrical engineering or are you reading on India? What are you doing? But I told him I had this great hunger in me to understand why we are the way we are. And why are these people the way they are? We are an ancient civilization. These guys are a recent civilization. How is it that they are at that stage and we are at this stage? Of course, today's youth don't experience culture shock because India is so westernized today. It's
My
like
goodness.
they hop off a plane from Mumbai into New York, they fit in perfectly at ease, no problem.
Yeah,
But
no stress.
no
Because
stress.
everything is available here, everything is
Yes,
visible here.
yes. But we entered off the plane from Bangalore into a technological society and wondered what on earth. And so I internalized that hunger into understanding about India. Gradually read. My initial reading was very undisciplined. Whichever book I got, I read, whether it was a Marxist book, whether it was a missionary book, whether it was an Indian book, Indic view, I read. But as I read, it became clear to me that there are different things that people are talking. So using my own discrimination and understanding these things, I was able to figure out that there are narratives going on over here. Eventually, internet came along. Once internet came along, once Google came along, it was a massive fillip to people
Oh,
like us who could sit in a bedroom and read all kinds of books, and archives came along and we could read these ancient books we had no hope of getting our hands on. And all of a sudden, the world is open. You have so much of information over there.
I think
So
internet is a boon to
it,
us. It's
it
boon to
is,
Hinduism. It's boon to the people who were lost. It's boon to those who were too westernized. So
yes,
those who were seekers. I think
yes.
it's a perfect. I think it has happened at the perfect time of the era.
It is a double-edged sword. It's a double-edged
Yeah,
sword
actually.
because everything is available there. So you
True.
need to understand, to have some discrimination, some viveka to say that this is a book that is written by this kind of an author with this kind of a persuasion. This is a book written by this author with these kind of persuasions. That takes some time.
Yeah, true.
Otherwise, we'll indiscriminately take whatever we find
Right.
on the internet and you won't know how to evaluate it. What are the frameworks you've used to evaluate it? That is not available. So that will come some maturity with some reading and so on. But to
True.
cut a long story short, you asked me how I got into this. I moved to Houston at a certain point of time and met my very good friend, Dr. J. Kumar Srinivasan. And I told him that, look, I've uncovered so many things in history, but I don't have a forum to bring these things out. This was a time when YouTube was not yet prominent. So
Okay.
I was wondering, how do we even do this? So we started an organization called Indian History Awareness and Research. And there was a forum in 2012 or so. And we started giving small talks to special interest groups and so on and so forth. Then my very good friend Sahana Singh, she invited me to give a talk in 2015, was it? I think 2015 or 2016 at a party that she hosted. So I said, what can I tell your party friends who are all, these people who live in US who are used to a certain kind of narrative? She just say, whatever you have been uncovering. So I put together a presentation that talked about evidence-based narrative on the Indian civilization. And she warned me ahead of time that my audience is very discriminating and discerning. So you have to be careful what you say. I was shocked that everybody loved it. The whole audience loved it. After 1.5 hours, they loved it so much. And I sat back and asked, there is a civilizational hunger for this. There is a civilizational hunger in our people to understand our past with evidence and understanding. So that really launched me into giving talks. So it is really thanks to Sahana Singh who made this possible. And with that, I went around, started giving talks at various places. I must have given more than 100 talks now in India, in USA, various locations, various cities. I conduct workshops and for high school teachers, all-day workshops. And now I'm going to offer a course at the Hindu University of America that is going to
Yeah.
be on reconstructing Hindu history. I'm starting that course in September 27. So this has been a long journey. It has not been an overnight journey. It has been one that started from my school days onwards, from my father's almara of books, reading those books, on today to Google and other things. It has been a long journey.
Okay. So what is now? Let's now narrow down to your discoveries. So what? Let's take the topics which are easy for people to fathom, And let's talk about certain topics like certain points like Dravidian theory, Aryan invasion theory, which is controversial. We want people to know your opinion. So let's start with easy something like what is your discovery about overall culture and Vedic era? So let's start with that.
So discovery is a very strong word, Vaishali. I think we stand on the shoulders of giants who come ahead of us, and we learn a lot from their insights. So at best, we are connectors of dots. We see a lot of data points around. We take these data points and try to make sense out of all of these things. So the narrative, I would hesitate to call these as big discoveries because there are many others who come ahead of us who have said the same thing.
Yeah, so we don't need to reinvent the wheel.
Right,
yeah.
right. About Aryan invasion. So that is the first big thing. After going through all these books at Oregon State, it was clear to me that this is an anchor point. Aryan invasion is an anchor point for any narrative on the Indian civilization. Any narrative. Whether you take knowledge systems, they'll say you're a young civilization. You don't have that much of time to have had knowledge like the Greeks or Babylonians who are older civilizations. You people came into India in 1500 BCE by destroying the existing civilization. By the way, you were a nomadic people. You were pastoral, nomadic warriors who came and killed everybody. You didn't have knowledge, and you did not construct cities. You did not do anything. You had to wait till the Greeks invaded you and till the other people invaded you, and Magadha's contact with Greek, that's what gave you civilization. So the first civilization starts there. So this is the narratives that the Westerners have. So I saw all these things and, oh my goodness, there's a problem over here. So to start with, we need to deconstruct everything. Starting with the notion of civilization. Starting with the notion of civilization, this idea of invasion, this idea about archaeology, everything were coming together in this notion of Aryan invasion theory. So it's clear in my mind that if we remove the constraint of Aryan invasion theory, suddenly our narratives are not bounded. You know, in mathematics, we always have upper bounds and lower bounds, and we try to work within these bounds because outside that, your model is not valid. Aryan invasion theory imposes a bound. It says you cannot look for any Vedic instance in India prior to 1500 BCE. You can't do that. So I said, if we can remove this bound, then all of a sudden our mind is unleashed. You can go and start exploring every instance without trying to, let me retrofit that into this bound over here to make it acceptable to a Western world. So that was the approach which I took, saying that let's see where these issues are wrong. So I dug into the primary sources. Who were the people who started Aryan invasion theory? Why did they start? What are the tools they used? What are the tools and the mechanisms and frameworks they used to impose this? And very soon the pieces fit together. So it was clear that the colonials, the other ones who came first to India, and they wanted to write a history of India. Till then, Indians are happy with the Puranas, Itihasas. So the Puranas, Itihasas, as well as the Sthala Puranas, this told Indians everything they want to know about India. So it was the Europeans who wanted to know about the history of India. I'll give you a minute to get settled. It's okay.
My kiddo, you please continue.
No problem.
Yeah, sorry.
That's okay. That is okay. So bottom line, after looking at the colonialists, they had a desire to write history of India for their civil servants, and so they commissioned writing these histories of India. And they were basically Christians who came with this Anglican church thinking that God created the world 4004 BCE. God destroyed the world in Noah's flood in 3000 BCE. Nothing can be there prior to that. So all of history must be there. They encountered the Puranas and the king lists and other genealogies over there and said, oh my goodness, these things are now talking about ancient timelines. How is that possible? So all that is probably wrong. So they took it on themselves to reduce the Indian chronology. So that is a starting point. So people like William Jones and James Mills and a whole lot of other historians of that era of time who were trying to write a history of India. So they found a Greek account which talked about Sandrakutos, Megasthenes Indica, and they've said that in the Indian account, whose name comes close to Sandrakutos? And they said Chandragupta Maurya. So they said Chandragupta Maurya must be anchored to Sandrakotos. Megasthenes came to India around 300 BC or so. And therefore, we know that Sandrakotos must be at 300 BC. The only problem is the Purana account of Chandragupta Maurya is about 1200 years earlier than that. So
Right.
there's a problem. So they came with a framework saying your accounts are meaningless. Your records are irrelevant to me. What is relevant to me is the Greek record and my phonetic translation and my imposition of this timeline. I'm telling you that is your true history, because the Puranas, they turned around and said Puranas are all unreliable. There is no history. It's all ahistorical. We can't believe this. Max Miller came and said that the Greek stories at least can be are rich compendiums of geography, of knowledge and other things. With the same breath, the same text, he writes Indian stories are meaningless, ahistorical, and so on. So they were even unable to switch to a framework where they could appreciate these things and say these things. Anyway, I'm diverging over there. Bottom line, colonialists came first, biblical thinking, and they imposed some frameworks in Indian history. Second, William Jones saw the commonality of Sanskrit, Latin, and Greek, and he said that
Right.
how is it possible? How is this possible? There's got to be some connection over here. So the Eurocentric people took over. Initially, they thought India is the homeland and Sanskrit is the ancient language from which other languages came. But pretty soon after they discovered this, the Mitannis and the Hittites, around 1880 or so, they discovered this Mitannis and Hittites in northern Iraq, approximately Turkey, northern Iraq, in that area. And they found that they were speaking a Sanskrit kind of language. They had Sanskrit names. They were invoking Vedic gods. So they said, how is it possible that Sanskrit and Vedic culture is so far outside of India? So I said, aha, this is possible if there was an ancestral language to Sanskrit, and that was maybe in some place, maybe Central Asia. And from Central Asia, these people have migrated to all parts of the world. And one part of the world, they came to India also. So that is a linguistic birth of the linguistic theory. And the linguistic theory, they try to fortify with archaeology. And very soon, the linguistic theory imposed some constraints that Aryan invasion had to happen in 1500 BCE. It was a constraint coming out of the linguistic theory and not archaeological find or any such thing. Although there have been attempts to relate these things. For example, the finding of a chariot in Georgia, the chariot burial in Georgia, they said that is evidence that this is the route they took to India, which is meaningless, utterly meaningless. You can't take one data point and construct a theory out of it. In one data point, I can draw a line like this, like this, like this, like that. Every line can go through the data point. You see what I'm saying? So you cannot create a theory out of one data point. Anyway, the bottom line is they started with the biblical thinking framework. They soon went to Eurocentric frameworks. And that Eurocentric framework soon gave way once again to a religious framework. The missionaries came along. Missionaries wanted to convert the southern India. So they wanted to see this division model. This Aryan invasion was literally God sent to them. So they tried to use the Aryan invasion theory to construct the theory of Aryans and Dravidians and those kind of things. That theory has been inherited later today by our academia. Our academia loves to use this same ideas, and they also employ etic frameworks. Etic framework means outsider lens. They take the sociological lenses that are appropriate for the Western civilization and use those frameworks to study everything in India. So our NCRT textbooks and other textbooks have got the conflict model. Every relationship in India, every relationship is reduced to a conflict relationship of who oppressed whom, who is the oppressor, who is the oppressed. Every single thing has been put over in that kind of a framework, and soon that has been inherited since 1970s, thanks to Indira Gandhi. But the Marxists have got a great desire to uphold all of these things because they believe their central philosophy is change will come on the back of a revolution. They have to kill the old order. When the old order is killed, then a new order, that is a Marxist world order, can be put in. To them, the old order is Hinduism. So by destroying Hinduism, they hope to bring their noxious ideology into the Indian polity. Therefore, they also have a vested interest in continuing this framework because this framework is great to them. It says Indian civilization is nothing about it. It's all recent. These are nomadic people, invaders. They had nothing of value. Everything came from Greece, Babylon, and all those kind of places. The only things they did is they created this caste inequalities and other such things, cows and all those kind of things. So the narrative has become overwhelmingly negative because of the 5 frameworks I talked about. What are the 5 frameworks? Colonial framework, Eurocentric framework, vested interest. Vested interest means missionaries. Vested
Missionaries, yeah.
interest, the academia, today's academia, which is liberal, so-called liberal academia,
So-called
which uses
liberal, yeah.
foreign lenses, and the Marxists who control the rules today. These 5 frameworks are in charge even today, controlling what your children are going to study in NCRT textbooks or SCRT textbooks or elsewhere, controlling what will happen as far as narrative of Indian history is concerned. Nothing has been done to dislodge these 5 frameworks. And so my interest has been to explore these frameworks, try to accumulate the evidence that says, why did they say the things that they did? What tools did they use? What methodology did they use? I try to understand these things and try to say, here is some evidence coming from physical sciences, from astronomy, from genetics, and so many other areas. And I try to say, this data, how does it fit in with the theories that you're putting over here? There is a problem. Every time data comes along that doesn't fit your established model, then we have a red flag. Red flag goes up and says, excuse me, this model that you're saying for India, linguistic model, does not seem to fit this new data coming in. So what sense do we make out of it? Is your linguistic model wrong? Is the data that I've collected, is that wrong? Is your linguistic methodology wrong? Are your conclusions wrong? So we as rational thinking, logical people need to ask these questions. Unless, of course, you're opinionated and you want to stick with your frameworks.
Right, but then how did this Dravidian theory that Dravidians are different from Aryans and they got suppressed by people? So now what is the solution for them? How do we explain that this is not true? And how can we debunk that theory? Because it's very important. There are a large number of people who live thinking that, that we or you, like people like us, came from outside and then we are suppressing them. So what do you think about that?
Right. So we got to see the data. We got to see where the data is and what the models are. So the data has come about primarily initially. William Carey, Colebrook, and others, these European colonialists, they believed all languages of India are derived from Sanskrit. That was their belief. 1700s, early 1800s, they believed all Indian languages are derived from Sanskrit.
Right.
However, there was a gentleman called Campbell. Campbell lived approximately in, I guess, in Hyderabad or Andhra, someplace in Andhra. He lived over there. And he was a collector there. He had observed that there are certain things in the Telugu language that did not seem to fit well with the Sanskrit language. So he took the help of a Shastri, and that Shastri helped him to compile a word list. And from Panini's Dattapata, he took the word list and he said, where are the cognates in various languages, in Sanskrit, in Hindi, in Kannada, Tamil, Malayalam, Telugu. And they tried to see how does this word change from one word to the other, and do they have a common root? That was their intention. Now, Campbell wrote a book called Telugu Grammar. In that book, he invited his mentor. His mentor was Ellis White, Francis Ellis White, White. He invited Ellis White to write the foreword. Ellis White had studied this for a long time in Tamil Nadu, along with the help of a Shastri, who compiled Sanskrit words for him and so on. So he brought about several examples where he amplified the differences. And one such difference is milk. Milk in Hindi is doodh, but in Tamil it is pal, and it is in Kannada it is halu, in Telugu it is palu. So they said, where is the connection from here to here? Then they tried to see the meter of the words used, the sentences. They tried to see the sandhi, what is the other such things, and the construction of sentences. And he proposed that there is one more language family in India. So what he wrote has come to be called Dravidian proof. This 40 page has come to be called Dravidian proof based on linguistic ideas. So once he said that, 2 missionaries jumped and picked this up. One of them is somebody called Caldwell. And
I would love
called,
to write this out. I mean, what you are saying, I must have heard some ages back and I had completely forgotten. But it's a very interesting point that who manipulated it and how it just became a new sort of a new theory.
Right,
Wait, let me.
right.
I'm just writing down the names. Yeah.
Right, right. So Caldwell and Geo Pope, these two missionaries, they pounced upon this with glee because it suited their narratives perfectly well. So Campbell wrote a compendium on Tamil grammar, continuing with this idea. And by the time he popularized the word called Dravidian, saying that the southern Indians are Dravidian people as opposed to the northern Indian who were Aryans. He brought in these ideas. He brought in the idea that the southern Indian is oppressed and backward because he's oppressed by the casteist North Indian who's brought his Brahminical Aryan religion on them and imposed on them. He brought that idea. He further brought the idea that if from Tamil you remove all the Sanskrit out, you will get a purer form of Tamil called Sen Tamil. He got in that idea also, that there exists
My.
a purer form of Tamil where you remove the idiom of Sanskrit out and everything goes away. So he also found a group of people called the Chanars, and he said the Chanar people are the original Dravidians who were oppressed by the Aryans. And the Chanars were furious. They said, no, we are part of the civilization. You can't call us separate. They were very, very upset with this. So bottom line is, Robert Caldwell, he brought in several ideas of Dravidianism, separatism, of how Tamil can be purified by removing Sanskrit out, how the Brahminical Aryan ideas were suppressing Southern Indians, so on. These ideas were used by the missionaries because they wanted to convert the Southern Indian, especially the Tamil.
Yes.
They wanted to convert Tamil Nadu into Christianity. So these ideas came in very, very handy. Pretty soon, the Justice Parties are found by the several Tamil leaders. So they took over this one. Eventually, it morphed into something called Dravidian movement. And this Dravidian movement led by several leading lights, if I may call them that. And one of them is E.V. Ramaswamy, called EVR, who reverentially is called Periyar in Tamil Nadu. So he also formed this idea of separatism and anti-Brahminical movements that he brought about, making life hell for Brahmins in Tamil Nadu and other places, all based on the internalization of the ideas put into motion by Ellis White that there are two separate language families, and amplified by Caldwell to say that the Southern Indian is oppressed. Cause for his poverty is because of caste system and Northern Indian as the Aryan, and so on and so forth. So these are the noxious ideas they brought into the framework. So when we get these ideas, we have to examine the evidence. Where is the evidence? So I often quote two leading people. One of them is Nagaswamy. Nagaswamy is a retired ASI general of Tamil Nadu. He's worked for many, many years in Tamil Nadu, and he wrote a book, Tamil Nadu, Land of the Vedas. He says there never was a time when Tamil Nadu was separate of Sanskrit. Sanskrit idiom, Sanskrit language has been there right from Sangamira. Sangamira is the earliest that Tamil literature can be traced to. From Sangamira all the way to the current times, he says that is evidence of Tamil deeply intertied with Sanskrit. Many people said that, all right, this man is a Brahmin. What do you expect him to say? Well, there's
Right.
one more professor. There's a professor called David Schulman, who is a Hebrew University professor, a Jew. And he came along and he wrote a book, Tamil, a biography, a recent book. And he says precisely the same thing. He's analyzed all the Tamil literature, the poetry, the works, and everything. He says the idiom used is one of the Vedic idiom. It's there everywhere. So he says today there's a cultural tyranny underway in Tamil Nadu, where the so-called scholars are going and rewriting the ancient texts by removing the Sanskrit out of it. So this is cultural vandalism. This is cultural vandalism where you take an ancient work, remove the Sanskrit that had in it, and you write the so-called Sen Tamil or pure Tamil and go on. So he laments that. He laments that such a thing is happening in Tamil Nadu. So I quote these two gentlemen. Then there are people who come and say, what about the Brahmin migrations? We have got so many records, copper plates, we've got epigraphy, other things that says the Brahmin came from Bengal, the Brahmin came from Saraswati area, it came from that area, this area. And what do you say about all these things? Well, that is a fact of life. That is a fact that during invasion periods and other periods, many kings invited Brahmins to their kingdoms, whether it is northern India, western India, eastern India, southern India. The phenomenon of inviting teachers to the kingdoms has always been there. It is not
But
as
that
if
was one comment I would like to make. In north, in the Chardham place, I think Badrinath temple hires only Brahmins from Kerala.
very true, very true,
Yeah, so
very true,
how is that possible? And that has been
very true.
happening for thousands of years. So
Yes,
that was the original culture of every kingdom. The North Indians used to invite South Indians.
very
In
true.
today's, even the modern time, frankly speaking, in our Gujarati culture, we always invite South Indian Brahmins to do things, not necessarily Gujarati Brahmins or not
Right,
necessarily North Indians or Maharashtrian, but we want to, because some have that faith is there, that their
right,
pronunciations are clear, their work is very neat, and their method is very clear, the process of doing the
right,
Vedic yagna. I don't
right.
want to take the names, but top most industrialists, Gujarati industrialists, they invite only South Indian Brahmins. So
Very
I
true.
mean, where is that clash coming
Very
from?
true, very true, very true. So we others, this is part of the work I've been doing, Vaishali ji. So I've been trying to collect examples like this all through history, which shows cultural unity of the nation. That there's cultural unity at many levels. It's not just at religious level. At many levels, of the idiom that we use, the stories that we have, the culture that we have, heritage that we have, everything, the inventions that we had, they're all common throughout India. And I'm trying to say that there's a cultural unity of the people rather than what the few Dravidian supremacists would like. Dravidian supremacists today are primarily driven by two ideologies. One is a political movement of Dravidianism, the DMK, AI, ADMK, and other parties. Other one is the church. The church has been at the front of breaking India forces for the longest time, and we keep reading the names of several people. I don't want to name them on your show, several
Yeah,
padres of that movement, but they have
yeah.
been at the forefront, whether it's Jallikattu, whether it is the nuclear plants, and whether it is a copper plant in Thoothukudi and other places. They have been at the forefront of ensuring that Tamil Nadu will not develop, but the outrage is always there. Outrage is always there, which is what Raja Malhotra ji is calling breaking India forces.
Right.
Arvind
So
Neelakantan and Raja Malhotra. Yes.
I don't want to get into political front. Let's stick to our knowledge. Now, how many proofs? Like you have already given many points, and I'm very happy that my audience will know that if we say the literature, if we say the poetries, idioms, whatever you mentioned, apart from that, what about the dramas and culture and the dance? Because as far as I know, the original dance forms and all those, they had all Sanskrit, text. So, what do you
Very
think
true.
about? Have you done any
Absolutely.
research on that?
Absolutely, absolutely. See, when we go all the see the there's so many things to say here. So many things to say here. So
I
I need
know,
to
but
give
I
the
want to
correct
stick
beginning.
to I want to stick to the theories. The
So
reason being is, people want to know a lot of political aspect of this. That there is Tamil chair in one of the universities and not Sanskrit chair.
yeah,
In Middle East, a lot of people have started propagating that Tamil is older than Sanskrit. Now
right.
that theory is
So
also coming
so
up.
let us
Yeah,
go with the earliest thing. I always say yoga is the backbone of Hinduism.
right,
Yoga, as we understand it from our various works, we know that it is the backbone of everything that is in Hinduism.
right.
So when we do, there are eight classifications of what we can do, right, in yoga, starting from the very earliest to samadhi, all the way down to samadhi. Various things we can, very 8 steps of that. So when we do dhyana or when we do any meditation, there is every chance that we hold certain things in our hands. And what are these things called? Mudras.
Mudras,
We
yeah.
hold certain mudras, and
Ji.
these mudras we may hold in a certain amount of time, breathing in a certain way, and this is supposed to have various effects on the body. Sometimes people ask, where did all these things come from? See, I'm very fond of saying in India, philosophy of the land has never been too far from the sciences. Sciences and philosophies never had a clash. They work together. So if we look at Ayurveda, it basically thought that the people's illnesses could have happened because of an unhealthy lifestyle or because of karmaphala, that you did something in your past birth, that's what it deserves. So in other words, there's one way of seeing it. One is it's a physical ailment which I can cure, or it's a mental ailment for which you need psychological help. This prayaschitta. When you do prayaschitta, it gives you
Yes.
mental satisfaction. Okay, I have done what I can to alleviate some of these things. So there are two ways of looking at many of these things. So the mudras that we hold are, what are these? You're touching pressure points, you're holding it, you're breathing in a certain way, you're stimulating pituitary gland to do certain kind of hormonal changes in your body and so on. So throughout our temple architecture, throughout everywhere, you see the divinities holding mudras, various mudras, whether it is this mudra, whether it is this mudra, whether it is the life prana mudra, whether it is which is different mudras. These are become hastas in dance forms.
Right.
So whether if you go to Bharatanatyam, you've got so many hastas, hand
Right.
gestures and movements. In fact, the whole of Bharatanatyam is a dance drama communicated with hastas. Hastas are telling the story, whatever is the story you're doing. Patakam, Thirupatakam, Ardra Patakam, Kattari Muttam. So many of these things are used in different contexts to tell different stories. So if you look at the dance forms that were there in southern India, it was not basically a Brahminical art, which is what people are trying to say today. It was rather upheld by certain jatis that used to perform in temples and other places, and they were highly honored for that. Even if you look at Brihadishwara, in Brihadishwara temple is in Tanjavur, Tamil Nadu. If you look at the epigraphy on the side of the temple, it talks about a particular dancer who lived in a particular street who used to dance there. That street still exists, by the way. Even after 1,000 years, that street is still existing. You can find the place where that dancer used to live. And so she was a dancer, and that Brihadishwara used to employ hundreds of dancers. Just like Somnath temple in Veraval, that used to have thousands of dancers and other such people. So all over India, the culture is similar. The hastas were similar. These hastas came from a practice of yoga. Yoga has been endemic to Indian civilization. It coexisted with philosophy, coexisted with medicine, coexisted with the dance form, art form. This is what I say, cultural unity, no conflict between science and science and philosophy. All these things are a beautiful blend of deep understanding in the Indian context.
So then nowhere Tamils were different from others. And I think the whole theory is also kind of made up theory by lots of people for their own interest. I think you have well explained. But now one more question, that when people, especially Tamilians, now since we have got into that area, in art, literature, in theories, in scriptures, I wanted to know something about one rishi who said who invented that language. I have forgotten the name of the rishi. If at all you know.
Agastya in Tamil,
Rishi.
Agastya in Sanskrit. So Agastya is supposed to have brought Tamil grammar to Tamil Nadu, to southern India. I won't say Tamil Nadu. Tamil Nadu is a new construct to southern India. He brought it over there, and he also presided over two Sangam periods. What were Sangam periods? These are the earliest literary works periods. Tamil in the Tamil lands and other places, southern India, this upholding of literature was very, very high. So the literary works and other things that were done, he presided over that. He brought the Tamil grammar. Now there is a popular thinking in Tamil Nadu that the land sunk in Tamil Nadu, in the southern India region, a land called Kumari Kandam. That was a place where there was southern Madurai. Southern Madurai was there. That was a place where the Sangam literature came about, Agastya and other places. That sank at some period of time. And now the third Sangam period was held in the northern Madurai. That is the present Madurai. That's where it was held. That's a popular thinking. And there is some factual basis to this. I have talked about this in my talks. People who are interested can go and see it. But it is not a huge continent from Madagascar to Australia, which the Tamil supremacists say. Tamil supremacists say this land was called Lemuria, and that existed. There was a huge Tamil civilization there, and that sank and so on. So there's no evidence for that. What evidence
Okay.
says is that during the ice ages and the melting of ice ages, some land, maybe about 100 kilometers from the coast of present-day Kanyakumari, would have been lost. You can see that in the continental shelf. If you take a look at that, or if you look at the depth map, any area of India 122 meters and above was a candidate for Kumari Kandam. And I've shown that around southern India, lands were there that could have perhaps hosted a civilization that could perhaps have sunk. This is what the evidence is saying. I cannot do anything but go with evidence, where the evidence is. So
Exactly.
did Agastya come in that time frame? That's the second question. Because if that land sank during the Ice Age melting, Ice Age maximum was around approximately, let's say 12,000 to 14,000 years ago. Maximum means water is locked up in ice. So that is a time when a civilization would have flourished. And that melted approximately 7,000 years ago, 5,000 BCE. So in that time frame, these lands are submerged. So that brackets for us when Agastya might have lived, if we take the popular saying that Agastya came to the south with Tamil grammar. Now we should also understand our Puranic account. What does the Purana say? Purana says the present Manu came from Dravida lands. The present Manu came from
Right.
Dravida lands. From
Right.
Dravida lands, the Ailas and the other people and everybody came from Prayaga and other places and populated India. So the population of India, as per Puranas, comes from southern India. So
Exactly.
these
Yes.
are the facts. These are the facts from our Puranic literature. So unfortunately, all this is lost because missionaries wanted to just convert to southern India. One way is to separate them from Sanskrit. If you separate them from their cultural base, then they don't have a base anymore. Then you can bring in something new.
Right.
So they have distanced them from Purana. So even today, you go and talk to one of the Dravidian supremacists about Puranas, they'll say that's all rubbish, North Indian rubbish, that's all Sanskrit rubbish. I don't believe in any of those. These ideas were put into their heads by Calder, and they don't
Okay.
realize
So
they are just articulating that.
So then, give me some idea about the difference, linguistic difference between Sanskrit and Tamil. I
Oh,
mean,
that's a tough
how?
one.
But only percentage may. But how many percent? Is it too different or it's not so different?
See, that's something an expert must answer. I cannot
Yeah,
answer
that's
that.
what I'm just
I
asking
don't see
roughly.
myself as an expert here. So, in my best understanding, see, there are several Tamil dialects, just like you're familiar in Gujarati dialects. In different parts of Gujarat, different
True.
dialects. Same thing in Tamil Nadu. Different dialects are followed by different geographical areas and by different jatis. So, I, having come from a Brahmin background, speak a kind of Tamil that has got a lot of Sanskrit in it. So when I hear Sanskrit, there is not much of a difference. I can figure out that, yes, these words mean this and so on. With very little assumption, I can figure out what a Sanskrit means because there is a lot of Sanskrit in Brahmin Tamil. However, if you go to a different jati and take a look at their Tamil, it might be removed from this. So these are some of the evidences that
Okay.
supremacists have pounced upon, saying that these various differences say certain things. But the only thing is that uh, if there was a common language in the area that we call India, and why am I saying this? Because we know India has been populated by people for a very long time. In my talks, I'm saying we have got artifacts from 1 million years ago. In Tamil Nadu, if you go, we have got hand axes and other things from 1 million years ago. You go to Narmada Valley, you find a skull from 350,000 years ago. You go to Athiram Pakkam in Tamil Nadu, you find stone tools from 350,000, 250,000 years ago. Then you look at the works of geneticists who are saying that African people came into India about 70,000 years ago. So there are several people who have been in India, whether these were the hominids called Homo erectus and the Homo sapien, whether the continuum of their species continuing on to present India. Point is, there's been human presence in India for the longest time. How did they communicate? Were they grunting? Were they saying, ah, ooh, hoo, ha, and all those kind of things? No, there must have been a proto-language. How do we know there's a proto-language? We know there's a proto-language because geneticists today know that there is a gene called FOXP2, FOXP2. FOXP2 is responsible for speech. If a chimpanzee had FOXP2, it could speak like us, but it doesn't have. It doesn't have. Humans have this. Humans are apparently got this mutation some 200,000 years ago or so. It gave us the ability to speak. So this means at least for 200,000 years in India, there has been the ability to speak. There must have been some language, proto language, and so on and so forth. So the
Okay,
best
so
thinking.
yeah,
Sorry,
so
go
what
ahead.
is your, no, that's fine, because I'm running out of time, so I want to cover a few more questions. Now let's understand the timeline. Now, what do you have you come across about timeline of Mahabharata and Ramayana? What do you think when the Ram was born, and what is the timeline? When did Mahabharata happen?
So these are difficult questions to answer, Vaishali ji,
I
because there
know.
is a lot of evidence one way and the other. There's a lot of
Right.
evidence one way and the other. So we will have to continue investigating. There are a lot of great researchers out there who are investigating data, evidence, and trying to come up with narratives. So my best thinking is we have to continue on this path and try
Okay.
to explain where the differences are. So that's not an area I'd like to go into. I fully recognize that I've given a talk out there on estimating the date of the Ramayana, where
Right. That's the
we
reason I'm
know,
asking you. Yeah.
yes, so we know that there is some evidence in the itihasas that can be dated. There is some evidence in the itihasas that can be precisely dated using astronomy, that can be dated using geography, by using botany, by using various other things. We can date these things.
Also
We know
Panchang.
that.
Yeah.
Panchang, yeah, we know these things. But to come out and say precisely that this is the time Ramayana happened, you cannot do that without trampling on some evidence. So the
Evidence
reason is,
isn't what? Physical evidence we don't have. All we have are
well, the
scriptures.
point is, see, again, you're going to philosophical areas here now. We
No,
have
point is,
evidence.
as in, the reason I'm asking you is because there is a difference in the time frame which is given by the modern Indian modern as well as modern scholars, and then there is and compared to what Vedic scholars, as in those who study in
Yes,
pathshalas,
yes, 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 yes. So
their timeline starts from 4,32,000 for each yuga.
itihasas. So the
Yes.
itihasas say that Rama was born Treta Yuga. So what do we make out of that? How many years was that? If we take this Chaturyuga timeline as 1 is to 2 is to 3 is to 4 from Kali Yuga, then we are talking about enormous timelines here. So how do we reconcile those timelines with this? So the persons who are trying to do scientific dating, they'll say we have to investigate it. Where did this Yuga model come from? Who proposed the Yuga model? Was
That
that
comes
inside?
from scriptures. That I'm very sure.
Correct.
I know where it
Correct.
comes from.
Yes, yes,
So it
yes, yes.
comes from Puranas
I
in Srimad
understand. I understand.
Bhagavatam.
I understand. So
Second
this is
chapter
why I
it is
said. This
there.
is why I said. This is why I
Yeah,
said that we cannot make a date without trampling on some evidence or the other.
I know, I know. Okay, so good. I understand. I'm just asking you because I have to keep asking certain questions. I mean, certain questions I want to know. Your opinion. Now, one more thing. Like, how do you see the history book now? Because our history book, the way it is being manipulated, what do you think? What we should change, and how much?
So,
We will just give
so
the pointers. Yeah.
So there are tremendous numbers of things to change. I have been involved in this in Texas. Jay Kumar, myself, and a couple of others, we got together, Texas Education Agency. We reviewed the textbooks used in Texas. 2014 to 2015, we gave recommendations. So we know what American children learn about India. That's one thing. Then we have been involved with the state of Telangana for 3 years, where we reviewed several of the textbooks and gave almost 150-page report on various issues over there. We have come to the conclusion that these are not topical changes. These are not changes where you go and change this line, change that word, change that
Right.
line.
Exactly. That's the reason I'm
Not
asking you the topic, main thing.
right now. The best way to say it is we need to tear up the textbooks, because even the arrangement of chapters, even
It's not
that
correct.
contains some subliminal idea, So there are problems in the NCERT textbooks all over the place. Right now,
Okay.
NCERT textbooks, if you pick it up for 12th standard, it starts from the Harappa period and it jumps all the way to Buddhist period. After the end of Harappa to Buddhist period, they left a hole where apparently this Aryan invasion was, because people criticized them. They removed their entire Aryan period out and they left a hole over there. So this is the way our textbook writers think it's okay to teach. And this textbook has not been revised since 2015. 2015 to 2020, 5 years, children have been having a hole in their education at the end of Harappa going to Buddhist period. No idea what happened. How did all these Upanishads come? How did all these samhitas and other things come? Were
So
they
much
the output of
literature we
rishis?
have.
Yes, were
It's
they the output
thousand
of
years.
rishis?
Yeah, since 1,000 years we have not created anything new. So much was written already 1,000 years back, and before that they have been writing, and for thousands
Right,
of years.
right.
So my next question is, how do you, in the current scenario, whatever your role is, so how are you? What are you working on in university, that Hindu University of America? What is that?
Hindu
Yeah,
University of America, yes, Hindu
right.
University of America. We're offering a two-term course now, or at least I'm offering this two-term course now, starting in September 27th, and next one will be next year. I'm reconstructing Hindu history. So everything that I try to say, we don't have time to talk about these things, but the things I do in my workshop, I've expanded on these things, and this has become, we investigate what are the narratives, what are the methods, what are the new evidence, how do we analyze them, where does this method take us. So in other words, somebody who takes this course will understand where are the problems with Indian history, what are the narratives, who brought them, primary sources, how to critique them, how to go with a new narrative. So this is what I'm covering in my two-term course over here. And I'm hoping to give this also in India. I'm hoping to give this in short-term summer courses in India. Hopefully after COVID is done and we can travel, I'm hoping that I can travel and offer this as certificate courses in Indian universities. I've already talked to some universities in Gujarat that are open to this. So hopefully we can take it forward.
That is very interesting. The reason I'm saying is because I've been facing this issue that people can do a PhD in America, in American culture, but we don't have even a degree course on Indian culture or India's or Indian culture or anything like that, which is little, I just don't understand how this whole framework happened, that we don't have a single such course which describes Indian culture.
Right.
Now, give us some idea. I want my audiences to know that, if you have to know about Indian culture, what all books in today's time we should read, especially, especially the authors of the olden time like Swami Vivekananda, Krishnamurti. But what is your, yeah? You have to
So
tell them, yeah.
one has got to break up their interest in Indian culture in many ways. One way to see is the frameworks of philosophy. If it is philosophy that one is interested in, what are the works you can read? My own favorites are Aurobindo. Aurobindo's got several works on Upanishads, philosophy, and other works. There are also great thinkers like, for example, Surendranath Dasgupta has got a 5-volume on Indian philosophy. Recently, a Facebook friend alerted me to Radhakrishna's book, also 2-volume book on Indian philosophy, which I'm also trying to read now. So philosophy, there is a lot of works, and that is a starting point. If you want to understand about the Indian framework, you must understand Indian philosophy. You must understand Indian knowledge systems. You must understand Pramana. You must understand all these ideas of what is Atman, what is Brahman, what are these, how did these ideas express themselves at various time frames into the Vedangas, from philosophy into Vedangas, into daily practice. One has got to understand these connections. And for that, I'm recommending you read these books by Aurobindo, read the books by Surendranath Dasgupta, read the works by Radhakrishna. Many authors are there. So if you can get hold of Indian philosophy, that's a starting point. From that, if you want to go on to knowledge systems of Indians, there unfortunately isn't many works over there. There are fragmentary works here and there that talk about these things. I'm hoping that I'll be able to write a book on this someday, but that day has not come yet. But there are great works by people like Professor Kak, Subhash Kak, and by several other authors who have tried to identify knowledge systems of ours in the past and how they relate to the present. Then if you're interested in the frameworks that people are using, linguistics and the archaeology, there are many authors out there. One can read Conrad Elst, for example. That is one name that comes to mind, and others. Then if you're interested in the conflict models and European frameworks, do read Rajiv Malhotra's works. He's written many works, and they talk very nicely about the frameworks the Westerners have imposed on studying India. So bottom line, depending on your interest, I recommend starting with philosophy before jumping into history and timelines. That's a very shallow understanding of India if you just did that. Start with
Okay.
philosophy, start with these things, go on until the conflict models of today.
Okay, so I'll just take one question. Okay, there was one question here. How do we love to get some recommendation? I think that question is disappeared. Hold on. hold on. Somebody had asked about how to go there. How this Indo-European language was imposed on us. Yes, yeah. But I think that you have already answered. And one question was about the recommendation of book, which you have answered. Okay, now last question for me is, see, after having this conversation with quite a few people, I haven't heard anyone saying that we should do something about Vedic Pathshalas because our knowledge comes from there, right? So how do we empower them? Because after all, that was our the heritage, that was our the centers, that was our
Yes.
schooling system.
Yes.
And why people are not thinking about empowering them? Because there are many pathshalas, they really need funds, they really
Right.
need to get empowered. We need
Right.
to create those kind of Sanskrit scholars. I don't want to say Sanskrit, but Vedic scholars who have studied any, done any specialization for any particular subject. Say, kisi ne Krishna, any Vedas they have done, or any Darshan Shastras or Puranas. So what do you think? I think this is something which I would like from take this message from me, that I think it's time that we do something about that. Have you thought about
Absolutely.
this?
Absolutely. Give me 2 minutes when I express in full. First of all, I give a shout out to my very good friend Mahesh Ramakrishnan, who in Bangalore has got Namma Sampradaya, which operates a Patashala, Goshala, and others, where Mahesh is a product of our times. So he's brought in a modern curriculum into the Veda Patashalas. Children over there learn about computers, sciences, languages, English, and other such things, in addition to the Vedic subjects. He's bringing all well-rounded Vedic students, and that's a very good model to go forward in other parts of India. Many people are doing this too. So that said, I think, Vaishali, there are two ways of looking at this. One is we need practitioners. Veda Pathshalas help us to bring practitioners who are able to bring the ritualized aspect of Hinduism, the other arts of Hinduism, into everyday practice. But let us remember that above that is a knowledge producers. In an early period of time, rishis were the knowledge producers. Rishis produced the knowledge, the deep knowledge systems, for which it'll take years and years of insight and learning to learn. And today, nobody can afford to do that. So the Rishi knowledge system has been reduced to a rich set of rituals that we practice today. That's what we're doing today. The situation is similar to me as a PhD. If I'm studying, let's say, the electrical network in India, the stability of the electrical network, I might do several things called eigenvalue, mathematics, that, this, everything, and say, all right, I've now figured out what the stability is all about. Then to tell the practitioner, I'll say, measure this quantity. If the frequency goes up, turn this knob. If the frequency goes down, turn that knob. So I reduce down that knowledge to a set of practices. So the person who is implementing this in the generating power station or the control room, he doesn't know anything that I just did, algorithms, mathematics. He doesn't need to know that. All he needs to know is I gave those recommendations. If that goes up, do this. If this goes down, do that. So this is helpful in the implementation of the ideas. So I see the Pathshalas and other things as the implementation of practices already prescribed. We need knowledge producers, and where are they? So in ancient India, they came from Nalanda, Takshashila, and many universities that we had, where you go as a young child, brahmachari, come after 20 years of studying over there at the feet of the masters. At that time, you learned all the subjects there are, and you hopefully have written your own book and other things and live on
Exactly.
for posterity. We need that, and that is not
Exactly.
happening. So we need the PhDs. We need the PhD curriculums where people go deep, study, postdocs for years. They should be supported in doing this. We need the knowledge producers. That is not there. So we
Exactly.
need
So
that.
I want with this conversation, one thing I would like to say, that all our scriptures should be taught in the universities as it is. Whether I study in Gujarati, Hindi, Marathi, doesn't matter, in any language. But I should, if I want to take a degree in, say, one Veda, so I should get that degree. If I want a degree in Darshan Shastra, I should get it. So that is the work which government has to do, where I've been proposing Vedic Pathshalas for last 7, 8, 6 years. Before Modi ji came into power, I had gone to this conference, World Hindu Congress in Delhi, And there, in the open forum, I had mentioned that we must have Vedic education system and Vedic education board. So that time I was discarded badly, and people were looking at me as if I'm an alien and I'm coming from somewhere else, and I'm talking about that my scriptures, I should get it as it should be on paper. I should get a degree. If I want to do a PhD, diploma, any degree, anything in scriptures, I should get it. So it's only 6 years that now people have started working on it, but I still haven't seen that thing, because currently what changes they have proposed is more about skill based, that one can study and go to a farmer or a painter or any skill and then get a hands-on experience. So those numbers are counted. All that typical Western side style of your grading system is I think getting introduced, and that is what they are working on. But I'm not sure if anybody's working on giving a degree on our scriptures. So I think with this conversation and wherever you go, I would love to request you that please think about in those lines, that tomorrow if my kids want to study in if they want to study in say IIT, if I want my son to go and study scriptures to IIT, he should be able to do it. And that should be the aim. Apart from, I'm not saying you discard any other streams, they let them be there, but our scriptures need to reach there. Now I go to any shop, I just don't see anything about Indian scriptures, Hindu scriptures, right? Vedic scriptures, or nothing on directly as it is. I mean, as it yani bhale ek chapter bhi kyun na ho, it's okay. Like if there is only one section, or if there are six darshan shastras, so it's okay if it is only one darshan shastra is there, fine. But that's not there, no? So if you see libraries, if you see bookstalls, and if you see curriculums in the universities, we are nowhere there the way we were there like till 200 years or 300 years back. So I think with this,
I'll just add to what you said, one line, and you can close. So that every regional language in India is a rich repository of learning, of text, and history, heritage. And so we should make an effort to bring in all of these things. So the conflict model that has been introduced by Marxists and missionaries can be demolished in the context of a cultural unity. We learn the different subjects that evolved in different areas in the bedrock of the systems, idioms that we have, which is Vedic and Sanskrit.
Fine. So I think with I would like to end this conversation with one desire, that our scriptures reach the universities, and I hope this message goes to the universe and goes to the people who are watching us, and also to the people who are working on it, and also those in the ministry who are there working on this topic. Because I've been asking this question to everyone, that we must have scriptures in the university being taught as it is. Yes. Okay, so I think with this we will end our conversation, and thank you so much for this. I think you have given me you have mentioned certain things which I did not know, or maybe I've not noticed. So I'm really happy to have this conversation with you, and thank you so much for your time. So maybe next time we'll have some other conversation some other time.
Certainly. Thank you very much for having me.
Namaste. Thank you. Namaste. Namaste.